My friends, it's official. Bakhmut has fallen. Yep, but this is it. May 20th, 2023. Bakhmut has fallen. All of Bakhmut is under Russian control. I talked about this outcome for some time. A long time. But since day one, the writing was on the wall. It was just a matter of time. Here you can see two Russian soldiers making their way on the top of one of the high-rise buildings, raising their banner on the city of Bakhmut, or rather Artemovsk. Russia has won the battle. And from this footage was extracted this still frame where we can see the celebration of the Wagnerians holding both the Russian flag but also the flag of the PMC. After months of fighting, the men from the orchestra are celebrating their victory. What the media called a bunch of convicts armed with shovels are now literally popping champagne. And hold on, is that a Fortnite dance? And here's a historical footage to remember. The commander of the 1st Assault Detachment of the Wagner Group, Alexander Kuznetsov, call sign Ratibor, hoisted both the flags of Wagner and of Russia on the last high-rise building in Bakhmut, yelling the words, "Victory." And here's a geolocations of every flag raising in Bakhmut on May 20th. Meanwhile, here's another Russian war reporter posing in front of the Bakhmut city entrance sign. And if things couldn't be more tragic, in these videos you can witness the last Ukrainian soldiers pulling out on foot across fields, very happy to have escaped from the furnace, with a burning city in the background. The Russians also ended up pursuing the retreating Ukrainian columns and captured the strategic village of Hromove. Let's see if they will further exploit their attacks or if they will consolidate their gains. In my latest video about Bakhmut, someone posted this comment and it really touched me, so I pinned it. I feel bad for both sides. Many lost their lives and their loved ones. We'll never see them again. And how could we forget the most colorful character of the Bakhmut saga, the bandmaster of the orchestra. Here you can see Yevgeny Prigozhin, the head of Wagner, posing in front of his men. They're holding the flag of Wagner, while he's holding a very special one, the Russian flag, and the same one he raised on the administration building of Bakhmut in the first days of April, the one dedicated to fallen war reporter Vladimir Tatarsky. Apparently, Putin also congratulated the fighters of the Wagner PMC and all the soldiers of the Russian armed forces that took part in the Battle of Bakhmut, and that all those who distinguished themselves during the capture of the city will receive state awards. And do you want to know a crazy coincidence? On May 20th, 2022, the Russian army completed the capture of Mariupol, and now, day for day, 1 year later, on May 20th, 2023, the Russians finalized the storming of Bakhmut. Are they gonna change the name for Artemivsk, Tyomovsk? Frankly, I like the word Bakhmut. It sounds very distinct. Prigozhin ended his 6-minute speech by saying,
Александру Зеленскому: Владимир Александрович, без сарказма. Ваши парни сражались отважно, сражались хорошо. Если вы будете на этом пути, то вы...
I don't know about you, but I sense some respect for the opponent. The battle would not have lasted so long without the stubborn defense of every inch by Ukrainian soldiers. What an epic battle. You've just witnessed the largest battle of the 21st century so far. Bakhmut will also be remembered as the first major battle in recent history where a private military company defeated an organized army. Granted, Wagner was not alone in this battle, no matter what they claim. A lot of their victories have been achieved with close coordination with VDV units, and Prigozhin even released this other statement. He thanked General Surovikin and various units of the Russian armed forces, like the Air Force, artillery units, and the Marine infantry. And let me tell you, this is highly unusual for him. However, we know our boy Prigozhin, he always has to troll.
стать второй армией в мире, безусловно, после самой сильной армии мира, это ЧВК «Вагнер». Сегодня, когда увидите Байдена, поцелуйте его в макушку, передайте...
Here's some footage of Wagnerian assault squads entering the Domino sector of the Citadel. The landscape, the destruction, the scale of the battle, the stubbornness of the fighters all point towards the Battle of Verdun. We could put images side by side and not know which one is which. And both battles lasted 9 months. Except that this time the attacker won. Because this time there was no Battle of the Somme. I'll get to that later in the video. And as always, the mainstream media is in complete denial of reality. I understand that this is not the expected outcome, but it's time to be legit.
And here we go.
British newspaper The Sun. Battered Russians fleeing Bakhmut after Ukrainians use meat grinder city to lure them like rats into a trap. Oh my god. They didn't get the memo. I'm really starting to think they actually switch Russians and Ukrainians around. Battered Ukrainians fleeing Bakhmut after Russians use meat grinder city to lure them like rats into a trap. Works like a charm. Oh, and then comes the New York Times. How Ukraine reversed the momentum in Bakhmut. They posted this on May 20th, the day of the official fall of Bakhmut. They're completely nuts. And now the BBC. Not that one, but the less popular version. Kyiv rejects Wagner claim of Bakhmut. What is that even supposed to mean? Flat Earth believers also reject the claim that the Earth is round. Doesn't mean they're right. And the copium is starting to pick up massive momentum. There's some guy on Twitter that wrote the following. If Bakhmut has fallen, the Ukrainian mission there is complete. Is it though? Is it though? How about we ask the president of Ukraine?
Здавати Бахмут ніхто не буде. Будемо боротися скільки можемо. Вважаємо Бахмут нашою фортецею.
Anyway, so yeah, I lost a couple more brain cells from the mainstream media. Oh, I almost forgot. Perhaps you should also tag Wikipedia, because they didn't get the memo either. They're still in denial despite the photographic evidence that the Russians captured the city. And with all maps confirming this fact.
Remember my grandmother saying to me, I don't care what they tell you in school.
But Bakhmut is Ukrainian. Yeah, I know I'm trolling a bit, but how can we take what they write seriously? Check this section, Ukrainian losses. 1/5 of the Russian number. It's not even 3-1, it's 5-1. Wow, very scientific. And check out their latest entry. On May 21st, Ukrainian Defense Ministry said its forces were holding on to a sector of the city while partly encircling its outskirts. Now, despite this outcome, let's be clear, the war is not over. There have been many ups and downs so far, for both sides. Thing is, in this one, Zelensky will have to take the L. Look, it happens to the best of us. Remember that Churchill had to go through the disaster of the BEF in France, the disaster in mainland Greece, and then right after in Crete, the surrender of the Tobruk garrison, and then the fall of Singapore, everything back to back. The problem is that in March 2023, Zelensky vowed not to abandon Fortress Bakhmut. But for sure there will be a moral impact of this battle, especially since Zelensky put so much political attention on the city and promised that it would never fall to the enemy. I even learned the lyrics of Fortezia Bakhmut by heart. It sounds so good. Volyu, Vohan, Ilyuch, Stini Horiat v boju. Mama, a ja stoju. Mama, a ja v stroju. Nene, ja boryus. But in any case, do not go check out their comment section in the newest comments. The rough, savage comments. I really hope they can come up with such a banger for their next song, Fortress Chasiv Yar. Chasiv Yar holds for now. Oh yeah, talking about Chasiv Yar. A report mentioned that the Ukrainian grouping from Bakhmut is reported to be retreating to Chasiv Yar, where a new line of defense has been established. That's exactly what I said. month ago. Phase 3 would be the most important. Straighten the front line and center your defense on Chasiv Yar. It makes me sad how many lives wasted for the exact same outcome. And I also love all the experts that were interviewed by the mainstream media. Here I found a crispy one from Switzerland. Despite successes in the city center, the expert is certain Russia has already lost the Battle of Bakhmut.
Now hand it over! You can't do that to me! Goddamn!
I also stumbled on this video a few weeks ago. French TV channel LCI had this video titled Russian Failure at Bakhmut, posted around March 28th. Being an analyst is not about having everything right, but mainly about how you construct your argument, and if it follows logic and rational thinking, and with all the information you have available, if you put the pieces together, you should get some sort of correct analysis. But in this case, in a huge lack of luck and misunderstanding of the actual situation on the ground, right after the video was posted, maybe a day or two later, Wagnerians broke through downtown Bakhmut, and the entire Ukrainian defense just collapsed. And in the description of the video, he writes the following: to make up for their failure in Bakhmut, the Russians are now threatening to use nukes. Whoa, experts talking about nukes. Rings a bell. Where did I hear this already? And in this video, he talks about how Ukraine won the winter campaign. Actually, what was the mission of the Ukrainian army? Here's the list of all Ukrainian units involved in the Battle of Bakhmut. Among them, 6 out of the 8 of Ukraine's elite offensive guard brigades, without counting artillery. In total, 36 brigades of foot soldiers, plus roughly 22 separate battalions. That's roughly the equivalent of 180,000 Ukrainian troops involved at one point in time in the battle. This is not a successful diversion when you yourself have diverted the bulk of your army there. So when German journalist Julian Röpke claims that Ukraine did not sacrifice its best reserves to hold the city, no, it's false. What about all the footage of Western armored vehicles like the Wolfhounds, the French Vabs, and various artillery pieces, including all the self-propelled artillery that was specifically sent to defend Bakhmut? Bruh. That's because in the latest hours, many articles were released claiming that Bakhmut is actually semi-encircled by Ukraine after their latest counteroffensive, which was more like a tactical counterattack carried in order to secure the withdrawal routes of the Bakhmut garrison. And looking at the map of Mikael Waltersons, a former officer of the Swedish Armed Forces, who do you think is actually semi-encircled? We often talk about the Ukrainian spring counteroffensive, but realistically speaking, the best moment for Ukraine to attack would have been in winter. And the Russians knew this, they expected this. The Russian army was in disarray, the Mobiks had no training, there were no fortifications on the front line. It was the best moment to strike. So what the Russians did was to divert the attention of the Ukrainian army away from Zaporozhye. And the Ukrainian army took the bait. And who was sent forward? The infamous Wagnerians, with Prigozhin waving his flag and all his PR stunts to make sure that the attention of all the world media was on Bakhmut, which increased the stakes for the Ukrainian army that always doubled down. And then another cope is when people say, yeah, it's just a small city that the Russians couldn't capture. It's a small town in Donbass that nobody cares about. Truth is, majority of historic battles take place in the most inconspicuous places. Unknown fields and rivers that nobody could even place on a map. To my American friends, think of turning points, important battles like Saratoga, or even Gettysburg, for example. Gettysburg was a small rural town of roughly 2,000 inhabitants in the middle of nowhere in Pennsylvania, utterly unimportant. However, it became of utmost importance the moment 170,000 Union and Confederate soldiers decided to fight for it for 3 consecutive days. A battle which left almost a third of them KIA or wounded. And it's the same thing for Bakhmut. It became important the moment that both armies unleashed everything they had in order to control it. Understandably, after the outcome of the battle, some Ukrainian troops are salty. The man of the 93rd Brigade wrote the following on Telegram: Zelensky or Zaluzhny are obliged to comment on this somehow tonight. If they wait a couple more weeks, like they did with Solidar, then it will just be an insult to the fallen defenders and the entire Ukrainian people. For your information, these guys of the 93rd Brigade are the real deal, and they formed the Ukrainian rear guard. They were among the last Ukrainian soldiers to depart Bakhmut. They fought hard to protect the retreat of their comrades to the safe zone. The 93rd Brigade was deployed around Bakhmut since October 2022, and they've been fighting there ever since. And they literally carried the team in the urban area of Bakhmut. Remember this video? It means the entire 93rd Mechanized Brigade is holding this entire front line by itself. And as you can see, its presence is confirmed by the military land deployment map. They also wrote the following: "This is not the time to be discouraged. Now you need to keep Chasiv Yar and other nearby points, because further is Slavyansk and Kramatorsk." I said it so many times. The actual important city to hold is Chasiv Yar. This is the high point that overlooks all the strategic cities in Donbass. And Slavyansk is really symbolic for the Russians because this is where the first separatists, the first pro-Russian separatists actually took up arms and fought against the Ukrainian army. And to end this video, I checked on the first time I mentioned Bakhmut in my previous videos. And in another coincidence, it was almost day for day 1 year ago. But seriously, Russians captured Popasna and now they're fighting their way through towards Bakhmut. Yes, the Battle of Bakhmut took forever. On November 30th, I mentioned that Bakhmut was defended by 20,000 Ukrainians. We're talking about 20,000 Ukrainians against 30,000 Russians. For me, with such odds, there's no chance they could hold. But to my surprise, the Ukrainians doubled down, tripled down, because the Ukrainian grouping in Bakhmut then later grew to 60,000 men, which as you can imagine delayed my previous forecasts. And at last, the Ukrainian grouping in Bakhmut rose to 80,000 if you count up all the surrounding reserves.
Где-то в среднем получается около 80 тысяч задействовано.
And then Commander Lotus estimates that the Ukrainians have another 20,000 men in reserve along the Slavyansk-Konstantinivka line. So of course, the battle took forever. But no matter what you hear, it was an attacking force of 60,000 Russians that defeated a numerically superior force of 80,000 Ukrainians that were heavily entrenched. Of course, the battle is gonna take a long time. And there's one last thing I wanted to bring up. In his victory speech, Prigozhin called out Shoigu and the entire Ministry of Defense, all these bureaucrats, by calling them crooks and corrupt. Huge accusations. So let's see what's going to happen with this. That's all I have for you today. Let me know in the comment section what you thought of my analysis. If you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to support my work, make sure to check out my Patreon or PayPal. The links are in the description below.